Welcome back to Legends May Live. Last time we left off with a strange, smiling man. He said his name was Indrid Cold, that he came in peace, and that his people, the Lanulosians, had no hatred and no war. And Woodrow Derenberg believed him. But when a man says he's speaking to a smiling alien weeks after first contact, when he says the visits never stopped, and when he says his family is seeing them too, you have to ask, what is going on? But a quick note before we get deeper into this unreal tale. All of our stories are true or allegedly true, but sometimes we have to fill in gaps or there are conflicting accounts, so just take it as entertainment, not a documentary. After that first night on Route 77, Woodrow said that Indrid Cold came back regularly. He'd see him outside the house, standing by a tree at night, sometimes on the porch, and sometimes even in broad daylight. Cold wouldn't always speak. Sometimes he would just smile and then vanish. Woodrow described conversations where words weren't needed. They spoke through thought and through feeling. And as the weeks went on, he wasn't the only one seeing him. Woodrow's wife and daughter began reporting strange occurrences. Flickering lights in the house, footsteps in the yard, figures seen at the tree line just standing and smiling, dreams that felt more like memories. His daughter Tanya later said, "He wasn't just telling stories. I saw them too. The lights, the men. I remember being afraid, not because of Indrid, but because no one would believe us." The story wasn't staying in the house either. Neighbors noticed strangers nearby, men in strange clothes who never seemed to blink and always had a big smile. Phone calls would come in and no one would speak, or even worse, they'd speak in voices that sounded like static. The town began to turn. At first, press treated Woodrow's story as a curiosity, but when he refused to back down, the tone changed. Headlines mocked him. They said things like, "The man who talks to aliens," and "selling sewing machines and space lies." And moreover, Lanulos Local goes loco. Local TV stations reran his interviews, and right away he became a punchline. But no matter what anyone said, he swore it was all true. He was adamant that Indrid Cold was real, and that he came in peace and meant no harm. But even as Woodrow stayed calm, his world began to fray. By now, John Keel had been crisscrossing the Ohio River Valley, investigating the strange reports of men in black, UFOs, and winged creatures that locals were starting to call Mothman. When he heard about Woodrow, he had to meet him. Keel interviewed him extensively and left deeply unsettled. Keel didn't think Woodrow was lying, but he didn't think that Cold was a friendly space traveler either. "These beings," Keel wrote, "seem to offer peace, but bring chaos." Keel noticed something else. Wherever Indrid Cold went, high strangeness followed. By early 1967, more people in the region began reporting visits from Grinning Men. Some came in dreams, some showed up on lonely roads, and some seemed to step through locked doors. They didn't always speak, and they didn't always leave any evidence of their visit. But they smiled. They always smiled in that giant, distorted way. Keel started connecting them not just to Woodrow, but to others who claimed that they were being watched, that they were being monitored and used. He began to wonder, what if Indrid Cold was just one mask for something deeper? As time went on, Woodrow began to change. He withdrew from public life, he stopped working, and just became withdrawn and started to isolate himself. Neighbors said that he had started looking tired and confused. When he did do interviews, they were now often fragmented, with parts hopeful and parts paranoid. He claimed that Cold took him aboard a craft and that he had actually gotten to visit Lanulos himself. He said that he got to walk among Cold's people and he watched them live simple, peaceful lives. And yet, back home, Woodrow was spiraling. On November 15th, just 2 weeks after Woodrow Derenberg met Indrid Cold, Two couples were driving past an old World War II munitions site, the TNT area north of Point Pleasant. They were enjoying the night air. They saw something at the side of the road. It was a large humanoid figure, over 6 feet tall, and it had glowing red eyes and wings that folded against its back. In their panic, they sped away as fast as they could, but the creature reportedly followed them, keeping pace and flying without flapping its wings. It chased their car all the way back to town. When they reported it to the sheriff, he laughed, until more people came forward. Dozens of them at first, and then hundreds. John Keel arrived in Point Pleasant just before Thanksgiving. He believed that UFO sightings, ghost reports, and cryptids weren't separate events. They were overlapping frequencies and sort of tuned into places where reality itself began to stretch. And if that was the case, then in Point Pleasant, the frequency was screaming. He took notes, interviewed witnesses, and tracked incidents by the hour. And again, one figure kept coming up. A man in a shimmering suit, smiling with an unnervingly wide and distorted grin. As Keel dug deeper, witnesses began to receive visitors. They were these strange, pale, and expressionless men. They were dressed in black suits that never seemed to wrinkle, and they drove black cars with out-of-state plates. They introduced themselves as government agents, but the questions that they asked were really odd. They asked things like, "Has anyone told you to stop speaking?" and "Do you believe in flying saucers?" What would happen if you forgot what you saw? And when they left, people reported headaches, memory loss, and just fear. The Grinning Man was no longer alone. Keel began tracking sightings with chilling consistency. Red lights in the sky, figures standing in fields staring back. People were receiving strange phone calls with mechanical voices or no voices at all. One witness, a local teacher, said that she saw a man watching her from the woods at dusk. She reported that he was wearing a silver suit. "I thought it was a costume, but when I looked again, he wasn't standing, he was hovering." Another man outside their home at 3 a.m. He didn't knock. Another saw a man outside their home at 3 a.m. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just smiled this enormous, odd smile. Keel's theory was radical, even among other UFO researchers. He didn't believe that Indrid Cold was an extraterrestrial, but something else entirely, something already here. "We are being visited," Keel wrote, "not by spacemen and rockets. They come from within, not from beyond. They wear many masks. One of them is a smiling man in a suit." To Keel, these were ultra-terrestrials, entities that could appear as whatever we feared or trusted. They didn't live in space. They lived between thoughts, between dimensions, and sometimes they slipped through. By early 1967, the town was on edge. Sightings were constant. Electrical disturbances plagued homes. Pets went missing. People stopped answering the phone. And then came the dreams of tunnels with no end, of smiling faces in the dark, of bridges falling. Keel himself began having them. He started to believe that something catastrophic was coming, and every time he asked someone what they saw, they said, "He was smiling. He looked like a man, but wasn't. I couldn't move." In Point Pleasant, the line between fact and fear blurred. For over a year, Point Pleasant had been drowning in strange events, from winged creatures with glowing eyes to men in black suits knocking on doors without reason. There were electric failures, phone interferences, prophetic dreams, and smiles. Endless, frozen smiles. And standing at the center was John Keel. In his journal, he had been tracking these incidents by the dozen. Cross-referencing them, he was searching for a pattern. By late November, the pattern was so clear to him. Something was going to happen. Something big. He just didn't know what. He said, "The warnings were there. Dreams of collapsing steel, people crying in water. Even phone calls with gargled voices predicting a tragedy." He tried to warn people, but almost no one took it seriously. It's difficult to prepare for a disaster that may or may not come, that has no concrete evidence and no clear direction. And you can't protect a town from a monster that no one can see. The Silver Bridge connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, or however that's said. It carried thousands of cars each day. December 15th, 1967, at 5:04 p.m., during peak traffic, an eye-bar, a small load-bearing piece of steel, failed. It caused an immediate chain reaction, and with no time to evacuate, the entire bridge collapsed in seconds. Vehicles plunged into a freezing river. Families vanished. Children drowned and parents screamed from the banks. It was a tragedy that left the town and all who knew of it broken. In the days that followed, the town went from sorrow to suspicion. Some blamed engineering failures. Others whispered about the Mothman, about Indrid Cold, and about the sightings that suddenly stopped. After the collapse, there were no more glowing eyes, silent phone calls, or grinning men at the edge of the woods. Some said that they were warning, and no one understood in time. Others said that the Grinning Man or Mothman was the cause. But to Keel, it was neither. It was the closing of a window, a chapter finished, and maybe something smiling as it left. After the collapse, Woodrow stopped hearing from Indrid Cold. There were no more visits, or voices in his head, or hovering crafts. He claimed that Cold had returned to his home planet without saying goodbye. Woodrow lived out the rest of his life in relative obscurity, still ridiculed, still loyal to the man in the blue suit. He believed that Cold was good, that he tried to help them, and that he came in peace. But for many in Point Pleasant, the name Indrid Cold became something else. It was an omen, a mask, and a symbol of something that we don't understand and maybe never will. So what was it? To some, the collapse of the Silver Bridge was a tragic but explainable accident. To others, it was the final act in a year-long performance staged by something intelligent. John Keel believed that Point Pleasant had become a window area, a place where these entities from another reality had slipped through. The Men in Black, the Mothman, the Grinning Man, not unrelated phenomenon, but overlapping echoes, glitches in the matrix, so to speak. And Indrid Cold? Keel wasn't convinced that he was ever real in the way we understand it. He thought that he might have been a projection or a sort of psychological impression, or simply a story that someone wanted us to hear. Some say Point Pleasant was cursed. Others say that it was blessed with a glimpse beyond the veil. But either way, once the bridge fell, everything changed. The town would never be the same, and the smile that haunts people, it never showed its teeth again. Thanks for listening to part 2 of the Grinning Man Encounters. Next time on Legends May Live, we explore the aftershock, how the legend of the Grinning Man spread to new towns, new faces, and even into the modern age. He's not just a story from the 60s, he's still smiling.